So our leadership speaker is Dr. William Duffy. Dr. Duffy's been with UIU since 2009. He was formerly the Vice President for Academic Extension until becoming our 21st President in April 2013. Dr. Duffy is a retired colonel who served 20 years as an active duty infantry officer in the U.S. Army, where he held numerous leadership positions that involve planning, organizing, managing resources and equipment, as well as recruiting in locations around the world. He received his bachelor's degree from the U.S. Military Academy of West Point, master's degree in education specialist degree from Appalachian State University, and his doctorate from the University of Memphis. Dr. Duffy and his wife have 2 daughters and 5 grandchildren. Dr. Duffy.
All right, thanks, Paul. Okay. All right, well, thank you all so much for volunteering to come to this session. You did volunteer, correct? Okay, good. Okay, just making sure. No, it's really it's great to see you all. I recognize a lot of your faces, and I see you on campus. And what I always encourage you to do, if there are issues, whether it's the room or whatever, tell me what's happening. Tell me what's going on in your classes. Tell me what's going on with if you're in a sport or something, or tell me what's going on in a dorm, because I want to know, are we doing what we need to do? Okay. So what I want to do today is. I'm going to talk a little bit about leadership, and I'm going to talk about some things that I think you're here to get an education, and ultimately after you graduate to do what? Get a job. Okay. So really, what are those things that make you marketable as you go forward? You got a lot of competition out there, and you know that you're going to have competition in every profession you go in. So what's really going to distinguish you from others? Okay, I think one of the biggest things that people look for, that employers are going to look for, they're going to look for individuals who demonstrate leadership. You have to have, most of the people that you're going to compete with are going to be college graduates, whatever it might be, but what's going to separate you? And I think it's going to be those things that really, what I look for in individuals, and leadership is a big thing for the United States Military Academy at West Point. Everything we did, we participated in leadership activities. So whether it was group work, whether we were in charge of small units, or let's just say small groups, or whether you took on, and once we moved to a sophomore status, you started to be what we call a certain squad leader, and then when you're a junior, you get in certain other leadership positions. We were constantly put in positions of leadership. You can't be a good leader if you can't be a good follower. Okay? And so part of this is, as you're working within groups, part of it, you have to learn to be a follower and how to work together and those kind of things. But what we did was we kind of went up the steps, and eventually that's how we learned our leadership, by putting us in positions where we would have to exercise that leadership. So what I'm going to tell you all is, you have to, while you're here going through your programs, you have to seek opportunities to be involved where you can get involved in teams, in groups, where you can eventually become leaders in different activities. How many of you are involved in some kind of club, group, or whatever, something like that? Okay, very important. So look at that, because as you're doing things, and it can even be for an RA, you got to look at where you're going to have responsibilities, where you can demonstrate to whoever your employer is, what are some of those, what some of those skills that you need to have as you move forward. So I'm going to highlight a couple things here. Leadership qualities. I'm going to give you a few tips, considerations for establishing goals, and how to set goals. Because no matter what you do, no matter where you go, you will at some point be responsible for things. You're going to have to learn how to plan some things, and there's some basic principles you got to follow. So I'm going to just briefly talk about these, and then any questions you might have, feel free to ask. I will say right up front, did I plan from the very start when I graduated from college to be a university president? What do you think? No. I went to West Point to be an officer and moved through there. And during 2 different assignments, I was at Appalachian State and I was at University of Tennessee, where I got involved with a lot of the governance and working within academia, and it just transitioned in, and from one thing after another after another. But the bottom line, every time, I know all my leadership training, everything in the past helped out. And I think if you get anything from this, it's just not about the books. Okay, they're going to look, people who want to employ you, they're going to look for people that have other skills that they've demonstrated in the past that separate you from others. I also want to welcome Chairman Firth, our Board of Trustee Chairman, who's here, joined us. Round of applause for him, okay? So that's my boss. So don't ever think you don't have a boss either. You always have a boss, okay? That's right. All right. So a couple of things, and I'm going to go over these things, and these are critical. There's certain qualities. Now you can Google qualities and you'll see maybe some different things. These are things that as I look at it and I put together, these are things that I believe are the qualities a leader needs to have. And these are the things that you have to stand fast on. And I'll say right off the bat, integrity. Don't ever compromise your integrity. As soon as you start going down that path where you have someone who's influenced you to compromise your integrity because of your job or because of your pay, you don't think you can get another one, you've gone the wrong direction. And you have to always demonstrate that you're willing, and that's about character. You're willing to stand up for those things that are right no matter what it costs, you know? And you need to be willing to do that. And that's hard to do for people that may not be in a high-paying position or even a high-paying. It depends because they don't have any options. You always have options. So that's extremely important. I talk about communication. I talk about the verbal communications, how you speak to people, how you articulate ideas, and also how you write. I'll give you, some of you might be in some courses, some composition courses where you do creative writing, okay? When you're typically anywhere out there in education, when you're going to get some things done, administrative and things like that, it's not creative writing. What you need to do is you have to be able to concisely communicate. And by that I mean, in anything that you send out, put the bottom line up front. What drives me crazy is if I have a memo or something and I don't figure out what they're saying until the very end. In other words, you start out the first sentence with whatever you want or whatever it is you need. The purpose of this memo is, I request such and such. Lay it right up front and then you justify it afterwards. But you have to learn to communicate, both in writing and verbally. So that's important. Part of that is, once you start and get involved in clubs or other things, then you start putting in a position where you have to stand up and start to communicate. You have to write things out. So the way you get better is by doing it. If you're never going to get in front of people, that's going to be a challenge for you. You've got to be with groups and you've got to, how many of you in any sports here? Athletics, anybody here? Okay, so the clubs, if you're in the clubs, again, look at those opportunities. Commitment to the organization. You'll hear me say, and if you went to how many went to the inauguration? Okay, in the inauguration, one of the things we talk about is university first and people always. By university first, you have to be totally committed to that organization and willing to put that first before yourself. In other words, I don't want it to advance myself at the risk of the organization. So that's, again, comes down to character, but it's one of those qualities that you just have to be willing to do that. I will say this, at the same time, that institution has to value you as a person. And that's why I say it's that university first, but people always. So it works both ways. It's hard to do that if you don't feel like they're also committed to you and your future. So, initiative. You don't need to be told to do things. Employers are seeking people. If I have to tell someone if I have to tell them what to do all the time, then I might as well do it myself. You know, you need people who trust yourself. That means you have to trust yourself to make some decision and say, I'm going to do this. Give them a heads up what you're doing, but take off with it. Use your initiative based on your experience. That's key. Don't have your bosses, don't have people tell you what you need to do all the time. If you have your own business, guess what? You better have a lot of initiative because there's nobody going to tell you except for your customers. And if it's 0 customers, you probably don't have enough initiative. Humility, that value your people always. Without your people, you got none of it. Without you students, we don't have a university. You've heard me say that before. Okay? We have to value you. And creative, don't be afraid to think outside the box. I don't know how many times that I've been talking to folks where I'm trying to look at things, they'll say to me, that's not how we did it in the past. I'm really not interested in how we did it in the past. Okay? There's probably better ways to do it. You know? So Think about that. Don't be afraid to be creative. And if you got an idea and you're not too sure, there's no problem with sharing with your boss or whatever, or colleague. Say, hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? They'll give you their honest opinion. Okay? But again, be creative. Fairness, not favorites. I said that for a reason. Once you treat one group differently than another person differently than another, everybody will see that. If I'm going to address salary issues, or if I'm going to address certain things, or take certain administrative actions, I better do it equally across the board. Whether it's for a vice president or whether it's for a staff member, it doesn't matter. Okay, so that you have to always try to demonstrate fairness. And make it clear right up front, here's the policies, here are the rules. Don't care if you're a vice president, don't care everybody has to be on that same page there. Okay, and decisiveness. Not necessary, we're not talking about being real aggressive. And that's one of the things that I had to adjust to in higher education. As an infantry officer, we could make a pretty quick decision. We had to assess things, but in higher education, and we gathered information, but it was a quick process. In higher education, I will just say, basically, in most organizations, gather information, but be prepared to make a decision. Don't take a year to make a decision. Don't take a month. Sometimes you have to expedite and move forward. You gather as much information as you can, but sometimes there's just not time to do that. So, and you have to make some tough decisions. But guess what? Who's responsible when you make those decisions? Who? Did I hear that right? Who? You are? That's correct. You are. So be willing to take that responsibility. That's a hard thing to do. When you hear people, and this is another thing, I say this to some of the colleagues, when I hear people say, let's have co-chairs for this. What do I translate co-chairs to? Sharing responsibility. That means I don't get as much trouble because you'll get in trouble too. You know, it's one of these things. I like to have one person ultimately responsible for whatever action there is. And I'm going to talk about that as you start to be in groups and things like that. All right? And a positive attitude. If I know I can't do something, what will probably happen? What is it? I probably won't be able to do it. I'll fail, that's right. So the whole point there is you're going to go after something. Be positive about it. And as I talk to anybody, I will always say, own the decision. By that I mean, if I have, let's say for example, I have a directive from wherever. I never say, this is what they told me to do. I will own that decision. I will give my input and tell them how I might want things differently. You know, I'll say, well, wait a second, I'm not sure we should do that. As long as they give me time to provide input. Well, once that decision's made, I own the decisions if it's my own. What happens if I don't? What if I say, you know, well, they told us to do this. What am I doing there? What am I doing? All I'm doing is taking the responsibility and taking ownership right from me, and I'm putting it right on them. And that's not what leadership's about. Leadership is taking ownership, and you've got to own those kind of things. And that's tough. Don't ever allow, I'll tell you, when you give up that top part right there, you might as well just give up on yourself there, because you have to have integrity and you have to have character. Positive attitude, did I put that? Yeah, okay, and then sense of humor. All right. It's always good to have a sense of humor. And I am a funny guy. You all just don't know it. I'm hilarious. I can tell you a lot of jokes right now that you would die laughing, but I'm not going to do that. All right? The point is, sense of humor brings a sense of levity to some tense, tough situations. And so sometimes you just need to, out of the blue, you've got to kind of get people, and sense of humor does help. Now, that doesn't mean to go out and get a book that says how to be funny, okay? I'm just saying it never hurts. Don't feel like you can't exercise your sense of humor, and there's a time and place for everything. But I think that's always important. Okay, I'm going to go through these real quick. These are real fast, and we're going to give you all a chance to talk. Some tips for you all. And if you want, I can put this, where can I put this so they could, if they wanted to have access to the PowerPoint or whatever.
You can send it to Daryl or Kayla.
Okay, so if you want a copy, we can get that to you. But as a leader, No matter what level you're at, whatever you measure, what we don't measure, we probably will not get accomplished. So if you want something to be done, you better be measuring it. Okay, and establish measurable goals to ensure accountability. Yeah, it has to be something where you can measure. So once you're doing something out there, when you're starting to evaluate folks, you better have something that you can measure. If I see someone that puts down there, I want to be the best that I can be. Well, if their best is to be terrible, that's not too good. I want to see exactly, and I want to be able to measure it. And that's how you all always get in the habit of having measurable goals. And when you're setting those goals, have timelines. And here's important for your groups. If you're in charge, in charge of groups, I will tell you right off the bat, if you don't assign people to do certain things and you don't give them a timeline, guess what happens? What do you think happens? Who's been in charge of some group efforts and things like that? Who's been in charge of them? Okay? What happens if you don't assign people to do certain things and you don't give them a timeline? It doesn't get done, but who gets in trouble? That's right. That's right. And if you really want to see people get the job done, all you have to do is get a little template. It says date, event, responsibility. The date is when they have to have it done by. The event is whatever the task is, and then whoever the responsibility, whatever name is. Once their name's right there by that timeline, what do you think they're thinking all the time? I got to get it done by that date. If their name's not on there, no big deal. Always, when you're doing that, make sure that you assign people for that. And always periodically do updates. Our board of trustees, they're always wanting to check on the goals for this university. I always have to give them updates. They're a challenging group to work with, but somehow I manage. Quite frankly, we do set goals, and we have to look at that, and we have to work. And it's no different working with the board of trustees than it is working at any level. Accept responsibility or failure. Recognize people for the successes. Nothing drives me crazy when I see people taking credit for stuff they didn't do. Okay? And you're going to see that throughout your whole life. You're going to see people take credit for, just understand that's going to happen. So when you become a leader, make sure that you recognize the people, and if you have failures, own the failures. Seen that my whole life. I can see people who don't own the failures, and I can see people who take the successes. Realize it's going to happen, and as a leader, you lead by example, and don't do that. Okay? This is big in this environment today. Because you send an email, it is not an action complete. I can't even keep up with my emails right now, and I tell people, if you got something important, what should they do? Good job. Talk to me. Come over and see me. Call me up or something. And they say, I sent you an email. I don't care. We had an old thing that we'd say, and I shared this with our board members. I said, we used to have those little sticky notes, and we did all those sticky notes. I said, a memo sent is not an action complete. That's the bottom line. Close the loop, and you have to do that sometimes through talking. I know, goodness gracious, you may have to talk to somebody, but that's what it takes sometimes. Okay? If you identify a problem, our team members, all our team members know, do not come to me with a problem and not have a solution. Anybody can identify a problem. It's the leaders that go out there and say, here's the problem, I'm going to analyze that, and I'm going to go to my supervisor and I'm going to tell them the solution. I'm going to have a solution for them. And that's what you do. You do not go, oh, we got a problem out here. Here you go, sir. Take that. Here you go, ma'am. Take the problem. Figure it out. I'm out of here. I told you what the problem is. That's not a good way to work with folks. So, real important. Do your own homework there. And it's just like when you get a project, all you need is general guidance. Do not ask for somebody to tell you exactly how to do your job. That's the quickest way to move on to another job. Let's put it that way. I told you about keeping the bottom line up front. Listen and do your own research before asking questions. There's the old saying, there's never a stupid question. Okay, I would just say this. If you ask questions and you haven't done your own homework, do not make your boss or the people have them do the homework for you. And then now it's so easy. You could Google the stuff, and I mean, but you got to do your own homework sometimes. And if you're working on something, work with your team members, whatever. But do your own homework before you go to your boss and say, look, we got a challenge here. Demonstrate that your boss, whoever might know, that he or she, you can show them how you've done your homework. Okay? Now, this last one, I just say this, I used to do this with all my folks. All of you are going to ask for letters of references. I know you will. You're going to ask somebody to give you a letter of reference. I have never asked for a letter of reference without providing the individual I asked with the letter that I wanted. I write the letter myself. Why do I do that? Why do you think I would do that? Exactly, because it's me. Because I know me. I know what I want my letters to say, and I know when I want them due. And I don't want somebody else that doesn't, and I worked for them, but I've moved on, but I know what I want to say. You know what I mean? So, and I did this at the high school level when I was also coaching soccer, and I would have these young men and women, these boys and girls in high school, they wanted references for college. And I said, okay, no problem. I gave them a sample. I said, send me your letter, your draft. And so, get in the habit of that. And if you want copies of sample reference letters, I can send them. I could have another thing that I can send to the OSD, whoever, and I can show you those. Whether you're going to a job, you're seeking a job, or I got a bunch of sample letters and things like that. But get in the habit of that. Trust me, when you do that, they'll love you. Because the people that you're typically asking for reference letters, they got jobs. They're busy, They don't know all your accomplishments. They don't know all the leadership things you've done. So that's the quickest way to make it happen. Okay, and then this is real quick. When you're doing goals, I'll send these out. I'm not going to go through all these. Anytime as a leader you're setting goals, there's a certain process. You always link it to strategic plan, measurable, all these different things. This is probably, I'll hold off on this because I think we've covered enough of how much time do we have there? Okay, so basically, anytime we could do another session on this. I think I've kind of covered most what we need. When I talk about measurable goals, you can see when I'm talking about measurable goals, this is how I set up measurable goals. We're going to have our student head count. It'd be percent growth from blank, what was ever the previous year, to whatever the goal is. I'm very specific about any goals, no injuries on the job, achieve a certain grade point average, identify specific tasks, course assignments, and so all these different things are when it comes to goals, okay? Using goals and objectives is important, and I go into something like that. So basically, I've tried to go through some of the basic things I think are important. I think whenever I'm talking to young men and women and they want to ask for tips and say, what do you think? I'm just saying you have to always, to really get yourself as competitive as possible, you have to put yourself in positions where you're going to challenge yourself. It's not always easy to be a leader, and right now, as you're working with your groups and all this, you need to look at opportunities for that. So I applaud you people that are involved in getting with your groups and your leadership things. So you keep on doing it. It's you're young, you're able to do these things, and just take every opportunity to challenge yourself and to grow individually. So.